I got a student loan question I want to hit next. So let's jump over to the student loan category. And it says, Carmen, I tried to make a payment on my student loan, but they told me it was in bankruptcy and could not be accessed. I thought student loans couldn't be put into the bankruptcy. The answer is yes and no as always, right? But let's talk about what happens with a student loan when you file bankruptcy. The question is not whether it's in the bankruptcy. Any debt you have goes into the bankruptcy. You're required to list every person you owe $1 or more to, or even less. If you owe somebody 50 cents, you're obligated to put them on notice that you filed bankruptcy. That includes student loans. Student loan debt is non-dischargeable. It doesn't mean it doesn't go into the bankruptcy. It's in. Now, let's take a look and see, before we go any further, let's jump over to the creditor side. Creditor gets notice that you filed bankruptcy. They transfer it to their bankruptcy division. So you're going to have to deal with that bankruptcy division if you're going to talk to them at all. Come back to our side. My clients go in. It depends on whether they file Chapter 7 or Chapter 13. In Chapter 7, the presumption is nobody's going to get paid because there's no assets of the estate to be distributed. If there's no assets to be paid out to the creditors, then what happens? Well, the student loan kind of just rides through. You get your discharge, and then you're still obligated to pay all that student loan money back. Pretty simple. Let's say there's going to be a distribution. Let's say the person who filed Chapter 7 has assets, and they need to pay some money back to their creditors. Happens a lot in Chapter 7. Routine, no big deal. Well, what happens? Well, I want to make sure that the student loans get a piece of that action. In other words, let's say a person files Chapter 7, they go through the process, and they have to pay back their creditors $2,000. Well, if $2,000 is going to be flowing from the estate to the trustee to the creditors, I want to make sure the student loan people are going to get as much money as possible out of that. Why not? Why give $2,000 to Visa and MasterCard and student loan gets nothing? I want to chip away those student loans as quickly as possible. So that's the way Chapter 7 works in a nutshell. In Chapter 13, you've got a difference. Chapter 13, this is really, really important. Student loan debt is treated just like credit card debt. It's not a priority debt. It's not like it's a tax. You have to pay back your child support. You have to pay back, if you're paying back alimony. If you have a priority claim, you have to pay it back in full in the bankruptcy. But what if you have a student loan debt? Well, a student loan debt's a little bit different. They get treated like an unsecured, non-priority debt. So again, if you're going to be paying back $100 a month to the trustee in Chapter 13, you want to make sure the student loans are getting the biggest piece of the pie they can. That pie is only $100. It depends on how you carve it up. If it's carved up 4 different pieces, you want to make sure your student loans are getting a piece of the pie. And I don't know how much simpler I can make it. And just because you're not paying it all back doesn't mean at the end of the case, at the end of the Chapter 13, doesn't mean that you're not going to still owe some student loans. You will, or you could pay them all back in the Chapter 13. It all depends on how much debt you have and what you can afford to pay back. So there's a lot there. I know a lot of meat on the bone. But when somebody says they get confused about bankruptcy and student loans, you want to make it crystal clear, or as clear as possible, as to how we're going to deal with these loans while we're in the bankruptcy.